There's a young man named John who receives a parrot as a gift. He gets this parrot, and this parrot is rude and obnoxious and just swearing all the time and bullying poor young John, and John doesn't know what to do with him. So John decides, well, I'm just going to talk nice to him and play soft music, and that'll turn him around. But the parrot just kept getting worse and worse. And finally, John couldn't take it anymore, and he grabbed the parrot by the neck and said, you got to stop, this is it. And the parrot starts yelling, and they're yelling at each other, and there's a lot of anger, and John didn't know what else to do, so he just decided to just open the freezer door and stick him in the freezer. And he hears all this squawking and kicking, and then it's quiet. And he starts wondering, oh, I don't want to hurt the parrot. Maybe I should get the parrot out of the freezer. So he opens the door. The parrot goes on his arm, says, I'm so sorry I offended you. I'm so sorry for my anger. Will you please forgive me? And just as John was about to say something else, the parrot says, may I ask what the turkey did? I love that story because we're talking about anger and emotions today, and using our Essential Spirituality, week 2 of our 7-week program. We just started last week. Last week we talked about releasing attachments or those cravings that we have, and this week is about cultivating emotional wisdom, about looking at those emotions that we all have as human beings and transforming them so we can experience more love, learn to love, heal our hearts. Last night, Kevin and I watched a movie called Moonlight. I don't know if any of you saw it. It won the Academy Award in 2016 for Best Picture. And it's the story of a young black boy named Chiron. He's the only child of a drug addict mother. The father's not in the picture. And his mom isn't very kind to him. She's a drug addict. And he is suffering from or trying to deal with bullying at school and loneliness and exploring his own sexuality. And he isn't shown much love. He has a lot of fear from being beat up from his classmates. And he's befriended by a drug dealer who acts as a father figure to him. But it's Chiron's story, and it goes through 3 different phases of his life and how he's dealing with his emotions, and not very well. He pretty much stuffs them down and doesn't speak much and doesn't say much until he does. But I love how the movie shows how we deal with these conflicting emotions that we have, and the filming of it was that it would get fuzzy and then it would get clear, and then it would get fuzzy and then it would get clear, and it's like that's how we are in life. When we're experiencing emotions that we don't understand, we don't know where they're coming from, we don't examine them, we're kind of fuzzy in our life. And then we have moments of clarity. We don't always know why we feel the way we do. We don't realize, as Roger Walsh says on page 71, our emotions rule our lives. The feeling we repeatedly invite into our minds eventually seduce and dominate our minds. Then these emotions color our perceptions, mold our motives, and direct our lives. What we feel within ourselves, we find reflected in our world. And that's so true, that how we show up, what we see, is how we see the world. So all major religions, and Essential Spirituality deals with 7 of the world's religions, offer practices on how we can transform these emotions so that we can experience more love. So we can see a world that is love itself and wanting to be love and wanting to be more love. We tend to want to hold on to our hurts and our betrayals and our resentments. We hang on to our stories, and then we wonder why that's what we see in the world. There's an old Eastern wisdom story about an older woman who is sitting by the side of the road, and a traveler comes up to her, and he says to her, "What were the people like, or what are the people like in this village? I'm about to move here, and I want to know what to expect." And she says, "Well, what were the people like in your old village where you lived before?" And he said, "Oh, they were terrible. The entire village was filled with liars and cheats and incompetence. None of them could be trusted. I'm so glad that I left there. It was impossible to make friends." And she said, "Well, I think you'll find the people in this village pretty much the same." Then another traveler came by, and again, he asked the woman, "What kind of people make up this village?" And she said, "What were the people like in the village you just left?" And he said, "Oh, they were wonderful. They were kind. They were good. They were honest. They were hardworking. It was a privilege to live there, and I'm so sorry to have to leave." And she said, "Well, you'll find the people in this village pretty much the same." You see, it's our perceptions. It's what filters we're using inside of us, that how we see the world, how we see the village, how we see the people. And this is Unity's third principle, that our thoughts, our beliefs, our emotions determine how we're going to experience life. It's up to us. What we're seeing is based on what is going on inside of us. And when we get stuck in difficult emotions, blame, shame, jealousy, rage, fear, anger, and we all experience these emotions because we're human, we see the world and other people in the same way. We project what we're feeling onto people that are outside of us. Richard Rohr says in the book Just This, if we could see these wounds as the way through as Jesus did, then they would become sacred wounds and not something to deny, disguise, or export to others. You see, we all have this opportunity, this invitation to transform our emotions. And Richard Rohr says if we don't transform them, we will transmit them. We will project them onto other people. We will make other people responsible, blame other people for what we're feeling, instead of taking responsibility for them. And usually we do that to the people who are closest to us, unfortunately. Roger Walsh says, we often judge, deny, ignore, or nurse difficult emotions when we can accept that human emotions are just part of who we are. It's part of our human experience. It's natural and normal to be part of our life. Then we can more easily learn from those emotions. He says the challenge is to neither suppress nor indulge, but rather to explore and learn. So we're always invited to learn. Our emotions are there to inform. So we may want to, the next time we feel anger coming up in us, or resentment, or jealousy, or rage, or whatever, fear, what is it there to inform us? What are we there to learn from it? We often don't want to let go of those. Eric Butterworth talks about a practice that he did in a retreat, many retreats that he held. And he would say to write down on paper an explanation of one of your hurts, one of your wounds, something that comes to mind that's hurting you. Write it all down in all its detail. Why you feel this way, where it's coming from, who hurt you. Maybe it's anger, maybe it's something else. Perhaps it's something you never shared with anyone. Just write it all down. Then he says, and what if you gave it to me and I told you, as soon as you give me that paper, you're free of that. You're free of that wound. You're not gonna feel it anymore. You're not gonna feel any pain from that hurt. Would you do it? He says most people don't realize how attached they are to their own pain, to their own hurts. Just think carefully about it. We give up an entitlement to our self-pity when we let go of our hurts, when we let go of those emotions that we'd rather not have. And it has a harmful effect on our lives. But are you willing to be free of that? He says most of us, if we're honest with ourselves, we're not so eager to let it go. We identify ourselves with those emotions. We identify ourselves with those hurts. Look at what he did to me. Look at what she did to me. Don't I have a right to my anger? Don't I have a right to my resentment? And we want to tell that story. He says he likes to call it substitutionary fulfillment. Someone might do something or say something against us that's disturbing, and then we realize there's nothing we can do about it, and so we take it on as self-pity. We substitute this fulfillment, and then it becomes who we are. Then it's the story that we share. Of course I'm hurt. It's my wounds. And we like to show it off. But are we willing to let it go? Are we willing to let it go in order to have the freedom that it can bring us to experience more love? You see, those human emotions that are challenging to us block the freedom, block the love, block the peace. We can't feel those when we're stuck in those stories. Many of us will say, no, don't take away my hurt. Don't take away that pain. I'd rather have that story to tell. Who would I be if I didn't have that story? Wouldn't it be better to heal your heart and learn how to love? In the Hebrew scriptures, in the book of Samuel, Saul is anointed the first king of Israel. There are 3 kings of Israel in the Hebrew scriptures. First Saul, then David, then Solomon. But Saul was the first. And Saul was a good warrior. He won many battles over lots of nations. But as he was becoming more and more successful, he stopped listening to God. He stopped listening to his divine guidance. He stopped listening to spirit. Anybody ever do that? We stop listening. We think, well, we got this. What's God got to do with it? And Saul was in that place. Metaphysically, he represents our willfulness, our personal will, our sense consciousness. It's all about us. We got this, not God. And so after this change in him, this willfulness was coming out, God wasn't so happy with him anymore. And so he decided to have Samuel anoint a new person, and he anoints David. Now, David's just a teenager at this point. He's a shepherd. This is before he fights Goliath. And so David afterwards fights Goliath, and we know that story, and he wins. And Saul brings him in and has him start leading many battles for him. He realizes David's really good at this. Well, David represents divine love. David listens to his divine guidance. David listens to God. And the people start loving David. They're not so happy with Saul anymore. They talk about David and his tens of thousands of battles that he won, and Saul with his mere thousand. And Saul doesn't like this. He starts getting jealous and angry, and so he plots to kill David. But see, when we're in our Saul place, we can't find love. That Saul in us, that personal will in us, is not aware of love's presence. So David hides, and Saul can't find him. And divine love forgives. A couple of times they ran into each other. David was in hiding and had an opportunity to retaliate against Saul. And he didn't. He forgave him. He let him go. Eventually, willfulness dies out because, you see, love wins. Love wins. Saul ends up realizing that he's got nowhere to go, nothing to do. David is the new king. And Saul falls on his sword. You see, but in order to experience more love, more peace, more joy in our lives, we have to be able to transform those emotions that we're feeling, that Saul was feeling. We have to let go of that Saul part of ourselves. We need to transform Saul into that David, into that divine love, into that place of forgiveness, into that place of love. It doesn't seem like we want that all the time when we're in the midst of our pain. It's hard to find it. It's up to us, though. We can choose to transform it, or we can choose to stay stuck in it. Lao Tzu says, those who are open-eyed are open-minded. Those who are open-minded are open-hearted. See, often when we're caught up in our emotions, we're not open-eyed or open-minded. I had a full range of emotions this week. I love when I'm working on something that, bring it on. This is what I'm going to be experiencing. All the emotions that he talks about in the book, I felt every one of them. I don't know if I've transformed them all yet. It's kind of funny, I was feeling really struggled this week with this talk especially. I didn't have a good example. And I realized this morning, I'm living the example. I'm living in this place of fear because the talk's not ready. Oh my God, what will they think of me? One of my teachers in ministerial school told us, most of the people don't remember your talk by the time they get in their cars. So what is this lesson for me is don't take myself so seriously. The Saul in me didn't trust the Lord. I love that you sang that in the prayer song about trusting in your faith, having faith. Because that's one of my mantras when I'm preparing a talk is trust in the Lord. Not in the Lord out here, a Lord in here. The Lord in here that knows that the Christ in me has this. The Christ in me does the work. Each one of us can say that whenever we're facing anything challenging, the Christ in me does this work. Trust in the Lord. Trust that you will be guided. And then follow that guidance. Don't be afraid. It says in the Bible many, many, many times, be not afraid. But fear is something that comes up in us so often as human beings. And usually it's something that hasn't happened yet. Have you noticed that? My fear this morning was about what I'm doing right this moment. It hadn't happened yet. False evidence appearing real. We imagine the worst. We're not living in the present moment when that happens. In my bedroom, Kevin and our bedroom, I keep looking, he's not up there. He's with the kids today. I almost always forget to put my retainer in, and then I have to get up, and it's dark, and my eyes haven't adjusted to the darkness yet, and I bump into the footboard. Probably 4 out of 7 nights a week, I do that. You think I would have learned that? But that's what happens when we're in the darkness. We bump into things. We bump into things when we're in the darkness, when we're not shining the light on it. We're not shining the light on the awareness of love's presence. We bump into things. We have pain. We have hurts. But when we shine the light You know how fear just kind of disappears in the light of day? You know, you could hear all these noises at night and be scared. I'll say for me, I can be scared, especially when Kevin's out of town. And in the morning, it's like, what was that? It's gone. Has a way of dissipating. Anyway, there are many exercises in this book to work on anger, to work on fear, to work on forgiveness. They're wonderful exercises. Just pick a path home, like Lydia said. There are many paths. We're all going home. We all get there eventually. Love wins eventually. Just choose one. Tonight starts Yom Kippur, which I love because it's the Day of Atonement. So it's the day of asking for forgiveness from anyone we may have hurt. And forgiveness is a process. It doesn't just happen. Some of the exercises in the book are about forgiveness. To start that process of forgiveness. It's a gift we give ourselves. You know, the apostles asked Jesus, how many times must I forgive? 7? And he says, no, 70 times 7. It means it's ongoing. It doesn't just happen. You don't just say, I forgive you, and it doesn't happen that way. So begin that process. So look at your own lives. Is there something that's blocking the experience of love for you? Maybe it's anger, maybe it's resentment, maybe it's fear, whatever it is, unforgiveness. Pick one of the practices in the book or a couple practices and work on them. Work it. The best one for you is the one you'll commit to. Commit to doing it. That's what this work is all about this week. That's why we're meeting in small groups, to support each other through this work, through these practices. Forgiveness is a gift of extraordinary power and benefit, says Robert Walsh. It doesn't condone the behavior, but it reduces the pain. And so I want to leave you with this quote in here from A Course in Miracles about forgiveness. It's on page 95. What could you want forgiveness? What could you want forgiveness cannot give? Do you want peace? Forgiveness offers it. Do you want happiness, a quiet mind, a certainty of purpose, and a sense of worth and beauty that transcends the world? Do you want care and safety and the warmth of sure protection always? Do you want a quietness that cannot be disturbed, a gentleness that can never be hurt, a deep, abiding comfort, and a rest so perfect it can never be upset? All this forgiveness offers you and more. It's your invitation, your opportunity to forgive. Start with yourself. It may seem a little selfish, but start with yourself. We can't give what we don't give. We can't give to others what we don't give ourselves. So I bless you and wish you less anger, fear, and whatever other difficult emotions, that you are able to transcend them, transform them, and experience all the love that you are. Namaste. Peace be with you.